Hey, this is Evan Longoria of your San Francisco Giants, and you're listening to TortureCast.
You're listening to a podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. With hosts Willie Dills, Chad King, Ben Lee, and Eric Nathanson. Dedicated to the greatest team in Major League Baseball, the San Francisco Giants. This is TortureCast.
It's Monday, September 17th, 2018, and this is episode 154 of the TortureCast, the podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. I'm your host, Chad King, and joining me from somewhat moist Georgia is Eric Nathanson. Is it that bad out there, or is it okay?
Oh, no, we're pretty good. Florence stayed north of us, and she actually sucked the moisture out the last few days. And now we're starting to get back to normal patterns and stuff. The humidity is crazy here, though. We're it feels like it's over 100 today. And what are we in mid-September?
Yeah. Good old Indian days, baby.
Yeah, pretty much. And to the listeners, if I sound a little off, I'm feeling a little sick because of the weather going up and down and up and down. But I think the cold medicine kicked in. So if I get loopy, you win.
Yeah, well, I think that Eric contracted that sickness from the Giants' sickness. Because they had a losing streak as of a couple of days ago. It extended all the way to 11 games. And, of course, last week when we joined you, they were at, 5 or 6. I guess they're at 6 games. And, man, that was bad, dude. It established a San Francisco Giants record, which, and overall, they haven't lost that many games in a row since 1951. Long before you and I were born. So this is the longest losing streak that we've ever seen for the Giants. I mean, 11 games. They won 2 in a row, of course, against the Rockies, so that was nice. But we already knew the season was over, don't get me wrong, but that just was like, not just the nail in the coffin, that was like the nuclear bomb in the coffin.
Yeah, they went from a 500 team to 11 games under 500 based on that losing streak. And it's funny because we all hated last year, 98 losses and yada, yada. But, like, this losing streak coming at the time it did, it almost made this season feel worse. Because the Giants were a better team than, I guess. We thought the Giants were a better team than what they've shown. And then to have the season just fall apart. I mean, you think about the beginning of August. You remember that Dodgers series. You were talking about how, they were close to rising from the dead and staying in it. And then 2 weeks later, they lose 11 straight, and they're out of it. And it's kind of like, they drove off of a cliff. Last year, they fell off the cliff in May. This year, it took all the way to September. And it was embarrassing that they were 0-11 in September until they finally won a game against the first-place Colorado Rockies, which is amazing. And it took a complete game to do it. It took Stratton going out there and throwing 114 pitches for them to do it. And that's not to say that the bullpen's been bad, because the bullpen hasn't been bad. But, like, you can't win games if you keep scoring 2 runs, 3 runs, like that. I think you have a note here on how much they scored during the losing streak, and it's ridiculous how bad their offense is.
Yeah, so the runs scored during the losing streak, and this is in chronological order for the 11 games. 1, 1, 8. That was a 9-8 loss, by the way, in Colorado, which makes sense. It's in Colorado. 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, 1, 1, 1. I mean, it sounds like binary code there.
That's all I can think.
I mean, it's bad, guys. I mean, the Giants' offense has been absolutely, by far, bar none, the number one reason why the Giants have sucked so much this year, and certainly why they tumbled into this 11-game losing streak. If they had an average, offense, I mean, we're talking Major League Baseball average offense, because their pitching is above average, by the way. There's no doubt that I don't think they would win the West or be the wild card, but they'd be just a few games out right now. I mean, that's when you do the math. That's just the way it is. Their offense is absolutely the number one glaring hole right now. And like you said, when they were, they took 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers and they lost that 3rd game by 1 run. I mean, we're sitting at that point going, if they have it in them, if they could somehow muster the will and the tenacity to pull this out, it's possible. It's possible. We were very, very immature, infantile fans at that point, because this is probably more of an accurate reflection of what the Giants really are right now. And it bears out in not only their runs scored recently, but the last couple of months. In fact, in August, I should say in September, they're hitting an absolute dead last in the major leagues, 204 average, with 9 home runs, which is last, 33 runs, which is last. But in August, they hit 217, which was also dead last in the major leagues. I mean, we're talking of a span of almost 2 months now, 1.5 months, of being dead last bottom. And I don't have the stats in front of me right now, but I remember looking, and it's not like the team in front of them was 3 points ahead. We're talking about the Miami Marlins a few points ahead, and then the Yankees and a few other teams at like 15 points ahead. So This is just an unbelievable chasm between the major league average and where the Giants are.
And it's a shame, because when we talk about the pitching, they have playoff caliber pitching staff. They really do. With the way Stratton's turned things around, with the way D-Rod just continues to be Matt Cain, Madison Bumgarner has been good lately. Andrew Suarez definitely serviceable. He's shown good flashes, which is great signs from Rodriguez and Suarez being young guys pitching into September for the first time. They have a quality bullpen with Watson, Smith, Maranta, even Melanson. I as much as we've crapped on him here, Melanson is actually having a pretty good year.
Yeah, he's had a pretty good year.
He really has. But based on the offense, I mean, they have an on-base percentage of .251 in the month of September.
Yeah.
That's 11 points lower than the Miami Marlins. You know, their batting average is 4 points lower than the Marlins. Like you said, they scored 33 runs. The next lowest is 42.
Yeah.
It's not even close. No.
It's not even close.
It's just frustrating, because as fans, we knew that they fell out of contention. But you'd like to see a competitive team on the field. And I think fans, because I'm speaking for myself, are just frustrated because it doesn't feel like the Giants are putting a competitive team out there. And then we're told that they're going to play Shaw every day or things like that. And then, you know, it's not happening, which I talked about last week. Pence is going to get his starts. But, like, why not put Slater at first more, especially with Brandon Belt and his knee problems? You know, give Slater right field more if need be. I know Slater keeps being the guy that I'm throwing out there, and trust me, I'm not a big fan of his outfield defense. But like the team, just they're getting Hundley's at bat to end the game yesterday. Kind of typified it. And I'll be honest, I barely watched the game yesterday. Football was on. I know
I didn't watch it at all.
Fans,
I watched Friday night, and I was there for Saturday, of course. Sunday, nope, not at all. Niners, basically.
I tuned in on my phone as I was watching, because I've turned into a big Jaguar fan, so I was watching my Jaguars at the same time, and I was kind of watching on my phone. And Hundley, like, he took a 3-0 pitch, thought he walked, then he took another close pitch that he shouldn't have, and then he swung at one out of the zone. And it's like it doesn't feel like they're putting themselves in competitive situations. When they're in certain counts, they're not jumping on pitches that they should. You know, I watched it with Longo. I saw in another at-bat yesterday. He had a 2-0 count, and there was a cookie right there, and he ended up just taking it. Like, if that's not when you swing, when are you going to? And it just adds to the frustration. You know, there's not much that can be done at this point. They're looking to see what they can do. But if there's not a serious reshuffling of approach in the offseason, then the Giants are just going to be left behind, and we're going to be talking about a 4th place, 5th place Cub for the next few years. I mean, this is the second year in a row they're going to be 4th or 5th place. And, you know, as Giants fans, that's frustrating. We're used to winning at this point.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, they lost 11 in a row, and then Chris Stratton came up and just, like, put his balls out on the table, because it's one of those things where he's been good lately, of course. And what I want to ask you, he pitched the first complete game of the season for the Giants, which was amazing. Complete game shutout, 114 pitches, like you said. And they won 2-0. There really has been a marked improvement after he had his conversation and session with Ryan Vogelsong. And I know we don't know all the particulars of what was said. I mean, obviously mechanics and this and that. But, I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. I mean, does Ryan Vogelsong need to, like, go through the entire pitching staff? Not that they've been that bad, but we need the equivalent for the hitting coach for the Giants right now, because he has just absolutely done wonders for Chris Stratton. I mean, his ERA is well under 3 over his last, like, 7 starts after, the Vogelsong magic. So, I mean, what do you think's going on there? What do you think he said?
Well, from what I've read and been able to surmise, Bogey didn't necessarily. He helped him with some mechanical issues as far as not letting balls drift back over the plate. But I have a feeling there was more of a mental approach aspect to it. And I mean, because Bogey's a bulldog, and he absolutely will fight through everything, and he has that mindset. I kind of think he instilled some of that in Stratton. Stratton, we watched him coming into the year. It wasn't D-Rod, it wasn't Suarez who we thought was going to be the young guy. We thought Stratton was going to be the young guy to really step up. There were articles about how his curveball had a higher spin rate than anybody else's curveball last season, and he was poised to have the breakout year. And I think mentally he just got beaten down. And somehow, some way, Vogie was able to kind of pull that out of him, give him the, I guess, kick in the ass that he needed to get back into the mindset that he had beforehand. Because it's the same game no matter what level. It's just a matter of if there's more people in the stands and the hitters are a little better. But you still got to throw strikes. You still got to, keep the ball down, do those kinds of things. So I can't imagine Vogie helped much in the technical aspect. But it does make me wonder going forward if this is a role Vogie is going to look for in the Giants organization. I can't say whether or not Kurt Young has done great or not well as the new pitching coach this year, because, I mean, they're just chugging along again. They are better than they were last season. But, I mean, that's because of the emergence of Rodriguez and Suarez and Bum being Bum and Cueto actually pitching well when he was healthy. So it's tough to know, what it was to change it. I hope that Vogie is going to stay with the organization. And it sounds like, I mean, I remember he was in the booth like a month ago, and it sounded like he likes being around the organization. He likes being involved. He likes, most guys will tell you when they retire, what do they miss most? It's going to the park every day. It's seeing the guys. It's the clubhouse. It's the camaraderie. Rarely do you hear a guy say, oh, what I miss is staring down Aaron Judge and having to throw a strike on a 3-1 pitch. No guy says that. So I wonder if he'd be willing to come into the fold a little bit and try it. And I know there'll be some shakeups. I just read today, though, that there shouldn't be, like, major shakeups necessarily. But there's got to be some sort of shakeups going on inside that clubhouse. I don't know if, we can put it all on the players or anything like that. But when you see a guy like Vogie succeed with Stratton, it makes you wonder what else he could do for other people.
Yeah, well, I guess they fired their strength and conditioning coach, which, clearly that was the problem.
Well, I got to give them credit there. Apparently Carl, I don't remember his last name.
Yeah, blame Carl.
Right, that was the whole thing a couple years ago.
Yeah, it was.
Apparently he needed to get shoulder surgery of some kind. So they fired him now so that he can go take care of what he needs to, so he can maybe try to catch on somewhere else or do something else with his time if he wanted to. It came off as one of those things like, yeah, okay, that'll fix it. But
yeah,
I mean, that's one of hopefully many moves that will be made. And I'm sure that's what we'll be talking about, in the next couple weeks and when the offseason kicks in. Because after the season ends, we're going to hear of a couple of moves and be a little surprised by them, just like last year with Rags.
Yeah, it's we didn't put it in the notes, but Bochy has one more year left on his contract, I believe, and there's been some machinations of will they fire Bochy, and it's not on the notes, like I said, but I'm just going to bring that up right now. I don't think they will. Because, yes, I know the Giants have a history of, delivering a ridiculous amount of money to players who have done so much for them in the past. And we went through that last podcast. But with Bochy, it's a little different story because it's not about performance physically, right? I mean, he can manage technically until he gets Alzheimer's or dies, right? I mean, his brain has not changed, so that doesn't degrade over time. And so the problem is they owe him so much because he really did do some just fantastic magic in all 3 of their World Series championships. And I know that they haven't done anything recently, the last 4 years. It certainly is not Bochy's fault. There's nothing that you can point to over the last 4 years that said that is Bochy's fault. Nor could you say, I believe anyway, that the best manager in the world would have gotten them to the World Series. I just don't think that's possible. So, with that said, their deficiency clearly is in offense. Their pitching is okay. It's not the best, but it's okay. That's not Bochy's fault. So, I think the Giants got to give him the last year of his contract. I don't think they're going to terminate that. I don't think they're going to fire him. I don't think they're going to send him off unceremoniously into the stratosphere. I think that they're just going to go ahead and do what's proper, what I think is right, let him manage 2019. Now, the problem is, of course, I don't see any immediate correction and immediate improvement with next year's team. So, unfortunately, I do think that Bochy is going to go out in 2019 with a 500 team or maybe even worse, and that's going to be it. But at least he's not going to go out being fired. I mean, I think they need to give him that one last year. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't imagine that they would actually fire him, but I have to wonder, and obviously, again, this is not the reason for the lack of offense, but I'm starting to wonder if he's lost the clubhouse a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you always hear about players wanting to go out and play hard for their manager and for their teammates. And I wonder if he's lost a little bit of touch with those kinds of things. I'm not saying he has, and I'm not trying to call him like old and outdated. But, I mean, when you have a veteran team like the Giants had to start the season, it's easier for those veterans to fall in line with Bochy because Bochy's a veteran as well. But when you keep bringing up certain young kids and trying to plug and play, and he may not always be giving them the opportunities, that could be something to look at. But I'm with you with everything he's done for the organization and everything he's done for these players. 2019, give it to him. See what happens. We have no idea what's going to happen in the offseason. Both Sabes and Boch are signed through 2019. I think Evans is the one on the hot seat.
For sure.
Yeah, if you want me to be honest, I think that's where the change might happen. If you want me to be honest, why wouldn't I be honest? But yeah, that's where I think the change might happen is Bobby Evans. And I think that there might be discussions and understanding between Bochy and the Giants, and it's going to be – I still think it's going to be on his terms. I don't see this season as enough of an albatross to just put him out to pasture. If last season had repeated itself, yeah, maybe it's worth discussing.
Yeah, I could see that.
But the Giants were competitive for basically I was going to say 5/6 of the season, until they hit this September wall. They were competitive. They were in games, even though us as fans, we'd see them get 2 runners on and we'd be like, yeah, whatever, they're not going to score. But they were competitive, and the players still went out and played hard. And so Bochy, he's earned it. He's absolutely earned it. And if he's willing to let his staff be shaken up a little bit, or if he's willing to work with a new GM, give him a year. See what happens. See if he wants to stay. I mean, who knows? Anything can happen this offseason. There's rumors that they might be looking to move Belt. There's rumors that they might be looking to move Panic. They'll definitely be in on the Bryce Harper sweepstakes. They're looking for young, controllable bats at this point.
Yeah.
So one of those pitching, guys, somebody like an Andrew Suarez might pop up in trade discussions to get some controllable bats because obviously the pitching is fine. And if Bochy gets a team, we know he likes his veteran team. But if Bochy shows something with a younger team, I mean, who knows? It might reinvigorate him. He might have that kind of renaissance that some managers have. I mean, Jack McKeon won a World Series at age like 73. And I believe Bochy's in his mid 60s, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. 65, 66, something like that.
Yeah, because he's been managing since like '95. I believe was when somewhere like that was when he joined with the Padres.
Yeah, when he was younger than me, basically. So
yeah,
that's great. I love that stat. No, I'm. He's been, an absolute boon to the Giants organization, and this 11-game losing streak really brought it into focus, and that's the problem. It's just if they had been, 3-8 or 4-7 in that stretch, this wouldn't have been a topic of conversation, and that's how bad the Giants' offense has been, and that's certainly not Bochy's fault. It's just not. I mean, they gave away, Cueto got injured. They traded McCutchen away, which of course was, they're one of their biggest offensive weapons of this year because he led the team in RBI and home runs and those kinds of things. But it's frustrating. But I think that the Giants do need to take a step back and just realize that Bochy still knows how to manage a lineup. The problem is that the lineup needs to be of a certain quality. He extracted so much out of those 3 World Series championships. Teams that were always counted as underdogs. Every baseball expert put them as underdogs. There is no doubt in my mind that his managerial capability is what put them over the top in all 3 World Series, because even though they swept in 2012, they were down 3-0 or 2-0 and 3-1 to in the division series in the LCS. Certainly in Game 7 of the 2014 World Series, what he did with Madison Bumgarner. I mean, it goes on and on and on. His managerial prowess is bar none. And that's why I think the Giants need to hold on to him, because he is not problem number 1 this year, or 2, or 3, or 4. He's way down the list, if there is any. So I think they need to give it to him, honor his last year of his contract.
Okay, so you were at the park on Saturday, and I'm sure you were around the players, and I don't know if you went club. Yeah, you went clubhouse afterwards. I saw that.
I did.
Was the vibe one of a team totally out of contention, or did everybody still seem to have the same respect? I mean, how was the vibe?
Good question. So I didn't go before the game, but I did go after the game, and to be honest, it was vacant. It was absolutely vacant. There were like 5 or 6 reporters. Normally there's like 20 to 30. And it was vacant. And so I don't know I don't know enough about the Giants' schedule to understand why that would have been. But obviously we were waiting in the main stage for Bumgarner to come out. And he, did his thing, and I posted that video. But the players weren't there. It was really weird. It was definitely the first game that I've been to in which had the least number of players kind of out and about. There was no music playing. There were just 3 or 4 players kind of by their lockers, some of the lower level players, and then Bum came out. So I don't know if that was a product of just the fact that I haven't gone to too many games over the last couple of years, or the fact that they suck so much they just kind of were hiding. I don't know. I mean, it's just. Yeah.
I mean, that was after a victory,
different.
too.
It was different. Yeah, no, it was a victory, and so people weren't upset or pissed or mad or anything like that. And that was one of the reasons why I wasn't sure if I was going to go to this game. But, yeah, it was different. Let's just put it that way.
And that makes me wonder. That's the type of thing that we can't qualify or quantify, I should say, with Boch. We have no idea his effect on the clubhouse in that way. Yeah. And it's. I guess it says something when everybody disappears. But, I mean, you just lost 11 straight games. You just got over that. You're out of contention. I mean, who the hell wants to stand around and answer questions after that?
Yeah. All right. Well. Speaking of the second game of the series, which the Giants established a 2-game winning streak before they lost.
Woohoo!
I know, woo! Madison Bumgarner went out and threw 6 innings of shutout ball before he was taken out early as a precaution. But it doesn't seem to be a long-term thing, and in fact, there's rumors that they might be readjusting the pitching rotation so that Bum pitches against the Dodgers, which he originally was not slated to do. So I have a little bit of video or I should say audio of Bruce Bochy talking about Madison Bumgarner's injury. He basically pulled his right side, they called it a moderate strain, during one of his at-bats in the 4th inning. And they don't expect him to miss his next start, but let's listen to Bochy.
He was being honest, about, it being tight there, and he was being smart about it. He said, "Hey, I can keep going. Do I feel it? Yes." So he would have kept going, but we made the call. We took him out, but he could have kept going. If this was a little different situation, he probably would have gone back out there.
All right, so the take-home message here was he's had a bad year, of course, offensively in terms of Madison Bumgarner stats, but he hit a double earlier in the game. He scored on a wild pitch, so he was part of that 3-0 victory. But he only pitched 6 innings. It was like 84 pitches or something. He was like really, really low. Or I actually think it was less than that. So apparently he's going to be fine. But it was quite a game by Madison Bumgarner, following up on Chris Stratton's shutout. In fact, they eventually shut out the Rockies for 20 consecutive innings until they scored against D-Rod. But what do you think about the Bumgarner injury?
Well, it was funny. I was watching the game, and you could see on that at bat, he kind of like just stepped back, and he didn't like move funny or anything, but you could kind of see he was gathering himself, like, oh, that hurts. And I totally get what Bochy's saying. If they're in a pennant race, he probably goes back out there. Yeah. I was trying to look up the amount of pitches he had thrown. He absolutely goes back out there. It was good to hear that even Bumgarner is not going to fight through something if it doesn't matter. That's at least looking out for the future at this point. Yeah, he threw 64 pitches. And for a guy like Bumgarner, he's been really high up on the pitch count lately. He's been hitting like 100 pitches around the 6th inning. And so he was finally
64 through 6. I mean, that's like, wow.
Yeah, he was cruising. That was a night where I literally was entertaining the thought in my head, wow, we could have back-to-back shutouts here. No complete games and then 2 in a row. That would be amazing. And it would have doubled the amount of complete games in the NL West. There's only been 3 complete games thrown in the NL West this year. But after that little tweak on the swing, it was I was appreciative of Bochy saying that Bumgarner was honest about it, because we all know players. We've been athletes ourselves. You're gonna lie to stay in the game if you can. It's just the way it is.
Yeah,
the competitive spirit is higher than the pain threshold. I personally have a high pain threshold, so I totally, you'd have to drag me off with like a mule. It's hard to do that. So it was nice to see that even though he was in the 5th and the 6th, had that little tweak, he was still able, and he got into some trouble, I think, in one of the innings. There was like a walk and a hit to lead off the inning, and he was able to pitch around it and strand a runner at third. I'm not sure if I'm totally right. This could have been Stratton on Friday, but it was good to hear that Bumgarner was being honest. And any other situation, he would have stayed. And I mean, you noted it. Bumgarner's been on fire lately. Where is it? 20 consecutive scoreless innings at home. That's, I mean,
dating back to August 7th against Houston. So, I mean, coming into tonight's 2 nights ago, that game, he had given up 11 runs in 11 innings, but that was all on the road. So that's why, this stat is differentiating him from his road performance. But he's given up no runs over his last 20 innings, so that might continue next start.
Yeah, it feels like the old Bumgarner is back in a lot of sense with the way he's pitching at home. It really does. It frustrates losing him for the 2 months at the beginning of the season, but it also how well he's pitching now highlights that just losing Bumgarner was not the issue. And it's funny that, I asked you about the vibe and the way it was, and I'm sure Bumgarner, sounded like Bumgarner and Bochy sounded like Bochy, but there's nothing behind it, and it really showed that the Giants are just, in a sense, playing out the string, but they have a competitive enough fire in some of them, that they're willing to go the distance. I thought it was so nice after an 11 games losing streak to have back-to-back shutouts. Bumgarner, you mentioned he hit the double. It's like, how far in was that center fielder playing? I really, when the ball went in the air, I'm like, oh, that's a fly out. And then all of a sudden they cut to the center fielder. I'm like, whoa!
I thought the same thing when I was watching it live. Yeah, because I'm like right behind home plate in the press box. And I was like, okay, well, there's there's an out. He's going to run for that, and just kept going and going and going. I was like, oh, he was playing pretty shallow, wasn't he? But that's fine. It worked out.
Well, I'm gonna say this and put a pin in it for another time, because we again don't have time to have this discussion that we should have one day. But Bumgarner wouldn't have tweaked anything if he didn't have to bat in the first place.
Oh yeah, you're opening a whole can right now.
And I'm gonna put a pin. I'm gonna put a pin in it though for another show, because we're gonna need stuff.
That's a hammer and a nail. That is more than a pin.
Well, because I mean, I piggyback that on, we talked about Bochy and how it's not his decision making that's made the ball club be horrible. When you look at other managers like a Joe Madden for the Cubs, he decided to bat Pedro Strop in the 10th inning of a game, and now he's lost his closer for the year.
Yeah.
So, it's very similar, and I thought of that when Bumgarner had that little tweak. It's kind of like you can't necessarily blame the manager, because they're using the tools that they've been given.
Right.
And so, and a guy like Bumgarner, I know Bumgarner is the poster child for let pitchers hit, but it was one of those things where, you see that, and like, had it been something serious and the Giants were actually in a pennant race, fans would be like, what the heck? This guy's a pitcher. Why is he hurting himself hitting? So like I said, we'll put a pin in that for another day, because I have definitely come around on the DH front. I'm ready for it, but
oh boy,
to see the team, still, okay, Bumgarner was hurt and still go through it, and the bullpen came in and they were pretty lights out that night. I don't really remember Colorado mounting much of a threat. I think there was an Arenado hit in the 8th inning. No, that was against Stratton the other night. It's hard to keep track of them both.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I don't mean to cause anger among the Giants fans. I know generally everybody wants the pitchers to keep hitting, but I think you and I we really should have that discussion one day. I just don't see the time for it today.
All right, we'll put a pin in that. I got thoughts. Anyway, I went to Saturday night's game, and it was fantastic with Bumgarner's performance and the bullpen after that, and they won 3-0. Earlier in the game, I went out for batting practice. I did a little video. I did some live streaming of batting practice. Hopefully you guys saw that. If not, check it out on Facebook.com. But Chris Berman was there, and he is a lifelong Giants fan. And I actually don't know the whole the antithesis of that, or the genesis of that, I should say, in terms of why he is a Giants fan. And I didn't have time to ask him that. But I did have a couple of minutes with him. I didn't record it because it was kind of a personal conversation. I know that, last year he lost his wife in a car accident. So it was things like that just kind of kept me from asking him to do a full-blown interview. Because I know he hasn't been very public lately. And so I just kind of was cognizant of that. But I was able to talk to him just personally one-on-one about just his Giants fandom and stuff. And so he was fantastic. He was gracious. He shook my hand, multiple times, talked about, his wife, but also being a Giants fan, not where it came from, but that, hey, you're a Giants fan? I am too. I've had, stuff all over my house when I was a kid, that kind of thing. Same thing, that I do now. I have Giants fan paraphernalia and pennants and pictures and newspapers all over my office right now. It's like I'm 44, almost 45 years old, and my office looks like a 14-year-old. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's bad. But the one thing that he did say is, the Giants are trying, and he's never going to give up. Depending on, despite the fact that he's in this position where people know who he is and what he does, he will be a Giants fan through and true, and he really appreciated my fandom too. So, I mean, it was a great conversation with him. He also has a daughter in marine biology who got a major there on the East Coast, and talked a little bit about that too. So it was a great conversation, but it was one of those guys where you just pull for him because, I've watched him since I was a kid, going back, and, rumbling, bumbling, stumbling, and all these things. And here I am talking to him, and I realize he's lost his wife. He's got his daughter in marine biology like me, and just the connections there were really, really, really cool. So I just wish I could have had a longer conversation with him. It didn't happen, but I got what I got.
Yeah, he became a bit of a caricature of himself in the last few years on ESPN, and I know fans were, having a tough time listening to him because he would do the back. He would do the home run derby, even though he did no other baseball stuff all year long.
Yeah.
But I seem to recall reading about how he grew up a Giants fan, and I think he grew up in the Bay Area because I believe he's a Niner fan as well.
He is.
Yeah, so I know it came from that, and I totally get the private conversation. I had one of those with Sabes about 5 years ago, and it was like, yeah, this is totally off the record. Like it's much nicer to make the connection sometimes than it is to get information, and we're fans. And like you said, it was one fan talking to another. You guys just happen to be in the Giants dugout.
Yeah, no, he was it was interesting because, he just walks out on the field, where we cannot walk, right? We have that barrier there that says, like, don't cross this line into the grass. And he just walks out there and is talking to Bochy and talking to other players and everything. And it's interesting how there's that dichotomy of kind of access, I guess, if you will. But, he's earned that, obviously, over the years. I just don't know what he does in his day-to-day life. I mean, I know he has occasional ESPN spots now, but for the most part, like here he is at AT&T Park. He's not covering it for ESPN. He's just there,
Yeah.
And they give him full access. It's weird.
There was a game earlier this season where he dressed in full uniform and sat on the bench and did the lineup cards. Yep. I think he and Bochy are friends. I think that's really, or maybe he could be friends with Sabian. It goes from the top, and it's been integrated. But when you've had a career like Chris Berman has, you should be allowed to do those kinds of things.
Oh, hell yeah.
You've earned that right, and regardless of what you think about that guy as a sportscaster, he had staying power. He was the face of ESPN for years, and ESPN has been the leader until all these other MLB Network and stuff made it easier for us to, be not localized, but, focused on one sport at a time, not everything. And he was the face for a long time. He's absolutely earned that right. And it's nice to know that these guys that have been in the industry for all those years are still just fans like us.
Yeah. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about D-Rod in his last game. They lost 3-2. The big hit was, of course, the pitcher, Antonio Senzatella's 2 RBI single that gave him that 3-2 win. But he gave up only 1 earned run. And by the way, it is the 10th time this year in which D-Rod has given up less than 3 runs and gotten either a loss or a no decision. That kind of sums up the Giants offense right there. I mean, D-Rod has been, one of the absolute touchstones of this year. And to see him with so few wins, like a Matt Cain, which he was Cain, by the way, in his last start, it's frustrating, but I think if you're a starting pitcher that comes to the Giants, you just kind of accept that. You just kind of go, yeah, this is not the Yankees or the Astros or the Red Sox. I'm just going to go ahead and pitch, and if I give up 2 runs and lose, it is what it is. That's where I am. Yeah.
It's so fun to watch him. I felt bad that Sunday he was pitching on a Sunday since it was a football Sunday, and I don't know about your house, but my house has it on screens all day. He's thrown 109 and a third innings, and his ERA is 2.3.
Yeah, that's dumb. That's dumb.
It's the second best ERA in the National League with anybody over 100 innings pitched.
Yeah.
And he's not even going to get the Rookie of the Year. He's not even going to get consideration. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, and rightfully so. Juan Soto, Acuna Jr.
Yeah,
you know, they've done their stuff.
It's a huge year of rookies. There's no doubt about that. So,
I give what I hope comes out of this is kind of what happened with Matt Cain. Is that I don't want to say hardens him, but it gives him, you know, more of a sense of, like, I belong, and it helps mentally in the future, because if this crap is happening to him again next year, then we know the Giants have failed.
Yeah, no doubt. So the Giants are now 10 games under 500 at 70-80 with 12 games to play. They're in 4th place, and their elimination number is down to just 1. Of course, that's because they have 12 games to play, and they are 12 games back. So if anyone out there actually thought the Giants still had a chance, they technically only have a chance if they win 12 in a row and the Dodgers and Rockies lose 12 in a row. That's not going to happen, everyone. So the Giants are out of it. Colorado is hanging on to a half-game lead over L.A., and Arizona is fading at just 4.5 back, but with 12 games to go, that's probably not going to happen, especially with 2 teams that they're trying to battle against. The Giants are dead last in September, like I said earlier, with a 204 average with 9 home runs and 33 runs. They also only hit 217 in August. I mean, that really highlights, you know, how bad their offense has been. But their pitching, conversely, has been pretty darn good. They are 9th in the major leagues in September in ERA at 3.61, which is actually better than their ERA for the entire season at 3.79. And in August, in which they were slightly under 500, the ERA was even better at 3.23, which was 8th best in the major leagues. So again, this just highlights the fact that, I mean, I know in social media when the Giants bullpen blows it or whatever, everyone focuses on that. We talked about it last podcast. I mean, when you are constantly tied, down by 1, up by 1, and your bullpen's got to come in, yes, they are going to fail occasionally. There's going to be a failure, a percentage of failure rate. But overall, they're doing well. It's just the fact that they cannot get one of those games where they're up by 4, 5, 6 runs, where even if the bullpen gives up a couple of runs, it's not going to translate into a loss. And that's been the biggest gripe for me, is the fact that the Giants only play close games. Literally, they only play close games.
Yeah, so I read something about how they've had, I think, the most one-run games in baseball this season, and they're under 500 when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Where are the stats? There they are. I mean, it's just it just highlights, like you said, everything that's going wrong right now, and there's no fixing it. There's no changing it. We've got 12 games left, and 6 of them are against the Padres, so chances are they're not going to lose all 12 games. Colorado and the Dodgers play tonight against each other. So I think that by virtue of one of them winning tonight, the Giants will be eliminated regardless of what they do. Because it's impossible for both the Dodgers and Rockies to lose all of the rest of their games. But they could still have... Yeah, they could still have a say, though. Like you mentioned earlier, there's been talk from Bochy that they might adjust the rotation a little bit and throw Bumgarner against the Dodgers. And based on taking 2 out of 3 from Colorado, they trimmed Colorado's lead to a half a game over the Dodgers at this point. Actually, the Dodgers and Rockies flip-flopped. Saturday, the Dodgers took over first place by beating the Cardinals like 17-4. And then, Bum and the bullpen shut out the Rockies. But then Sunday, the Rockies win, and the Dodgers lost last night to the Cardinals. So the Rockies flip back into first place. And with Arizona 4 out, 4.5 out, I think they're done. They have the Cubs coming to town for the next 3 days. They finish their schedule against Philly and Washington next week. For some reason, they're like the one team that's not finishing against the West. And so I think that they fell out of it. And had you told me at the beginning of this season that the division was going to come down to the Rockies and the Dodgers, I would have called you crazy.
God. Oh yeah.
I never thought that the Rockies would hang in like this. I really didn't. And I don't feel like there's one thing that I don't think there's anything we can point to either. We can't be like, oh, their pitching's been amazing, or oh, their hitting's been phenomenal. But like a stat went by, Ahmed Fareed shared a stat that Brandon Crawford leads the Giants with 51 runs batted in. And I believe he pointed out that Trevor Story has 57 runs batted in with 2 outs.
Oh.
Which is just brutal when you think about it, that the Giants leader in driving in runs has driven in less runs than, say, a Trevor Story has driven in with 2 outs, which is just, I mean, Kutch had 55 driven in, but he's gone. So 51 leads the team at this point. And to think that that just goes to show how anemic it is. The Giants' leading batter is still Buster Posey at 284. 284. You know, their home run leaders are still Longoria and Gorkys and McCutcheon.
Yep.
You know, and it's
still
just
15.
Isn't that crazy?
I know we thought it was possible at the beginning of the year that someone was going to get to 20. Nope, not going to happen. Not going to happen.
No, it's just not. And seeing, I mean, Colorado, we talked about it last week during the losing streak when Colorado took 3 from the Giants, that part of the reason Colorado's in this race is because of the Giants at this point. Because the Giants, they're not bad against the National League West. They've played great within their division. It's outside of the division and the Rockies that absolutely killed them. I mean, they took 11 of 19 from Arizona. They're 9-7 against the Dodgers. They're 8-5 against the Padres with 6 to play, but 7-12 against the Rockies. And that those 5 games are like the difference as to the Rockies being out of it and the Rockies still being in it. And I, for one, I'm a Rockies fan at this point. I totally want the Rockies to overtake the Dodgers.
Of course.
I'm glad the Giants don't have to play them anymore, just because, you know, you don't want to root for the Giants to lose. You know, and I know people are like, yeah, better draft pick and all that stuff, but I don't tune in to watch my team lose. I don't tune in to root for my team to lose. The players, they don't take the field looking to lose. They're not wired that way. And as fans, we shouldn't be wired that way either. I mean, I understand in like football when it's the end of a season and your team's, 2-12, you're like, screw it, lose the last 2 games, get the number 1 pick. But in baseball, I mean, how can you really decide there's that much of a difference between the 8th pick in the draft or, say, the 12th pick in the draft? There really isn't. So, I kind of want to see the Rockies, hold on. I do think the Dodgers have played themselves into a wild card berth, though.
Maybe.
But I actually think the loser between the Rockies and the Dodgers has played themselves into a wild card berth. But the Giants, they have their chance to, put their little stamp on it. They've got 3 against San Diego and 3 in St. Louis this weekend. And then again, 3 more with San Diego and 3 against the Dodgers. So they're playing 6 out of the last 12 games are against playoff contenders. So chances are Bochy is going to put the best team on the field he can for those 6 games. We might see more of Shaw and Slater and Garcia for the Padres games than we're going to, say, next weekend and the weekend after that. And again, that's good managing by Bochy because it's respect for the rest of the league. As much as everybody wants to see every young guy play, you kind of have to respect the other teams and give it your best shot. You're not going out there just to say, okay, you're better than me and walk away with a victory. No, any team can win on any given day. We've seen it. In baseball, the worst team is going to win 60, 70 games a season. So they've got to pick up those wins somewhere.
Yeah.
And what?
There's a rumor now that Bumgarner is going to be they're going to adjust the pitching rotation so that Bumgarner pitches against the Dodgers in that last weekend series. So that's going to be interesting right there. So let's talk about a couple of articles that you highlighted with Joel Sherman and David Bell.
Well, over the weekend, it popped on a Saturday afternoon. Joel Sherman of the New York Post put out an interesting piece, and I don't really, when baseball Twitter is talking about like a piece and why is baseball dying and baseball has been ruined, I kind of stay away from that discussion because I don't believe that baseball is dying, and I don't think the game has been ruined. But Joel Sherman of the New York Post wrote a really interesting article about how the statistical revolution could be somewhat killing the next generation of fans because we're taking away all of the old benchmarks, but we're not replacing them with anything. You know, when you and I grew up, 20 wins was a big deal. 100 runs was a big deal. 100 RBI, 200 hits, 30 home runs. Those numbers are numbers that you could hold in the palm of your hand and say, yeah, but he did this that year. And a 300 batting average is another one. But now with the next generation of stats, you know, people, and I've witnessed it myself. I've had it happen to me. I still like to talk about ERA. I still like to talk about RBIs. I still like to talk about batting average. And I'm guessing 90% of the people that listen to this podcast also like talking about those regular numbers because that's what we all grew up on. And I mean, maybe that's because our listeners, maybe they're not, 19-year-olds, but it used to be such a big deal. Like Sherman points out, when Pujols hit his 600th home run, there was like no fanfare. When he got his 3,000th hit, there was like you could hear a pin drop. It was that quiet. Beltre got his 3,000th hit last year, and like there was barely a blip about it. And these used to be big numbers. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I could list everybody that had hit 500 homers, at least come close to it. You know what I mean? I wouldn't necessarily remember Harmon Killebrew's home run total. But, like, growing up, it was always, Aaron, Ruth, Mays, and then I think Frank Robinson was after Mays at that point. And now, with the way baseball has changed, instead of celebrating when players do these things, we view them with suspicion. And his point was that with the new generation of stats, if you're telling people that this is what's important and xFIP is important and runs created plus is important, you're making it complicated because those are not – I mean, speaking for myself, I'm 39 years old. I don't want to do math. I just want to watch baseball in my leisure time. I want to enjoy baseball in my leisure time. This is my fun time. We do the podcast out of love. It is a little bit of work, but I'm not looking to put in the same work that, the guy who's writing about these things for The Athletic is putting into it. Because that's not what I'm getting out of my enjoyment. I'm getting out of watching the players, and that's why we still talk about 20 home, actually now it's like 30 home runs, but we still talk about those numbers. And I just wanted to know if you felt like as well that it seems like there's a new generation coming in trying to say, I hate being told I'm stupid. And to tell me I'm stupid because I still value the old stats, even though I can appreciate the new stats, pisses me off. And so I kind of wondered your take on it because I know that you also, like, we talk about batting average on the podcast. We've talked about ERA. We don't deep dive into some of the statistics, but we don't say that they're meaningless either. And I want to know if you felt the same way, that like this younger generation is coming up and it's like almost kind of severed the bridge to the old generation. Because I mean, if you take a 19-year-old and a 50-year-old and the 19-year-old's like, well, this guy had this many runs created, and the other guy's like, yeah, well, he batted 300 and he had 25 home runs. Like, they're saying the same thing. It just doesn't sound the same anymore.
Yeah, there's no doubt that baseball has trended toward this statistical, anomaly in terms of what we're trying to do in predicting, players' performance. You and I grew up at an age where it really was just batting average, RBI, home runs, whatever. I completely appreciate the current statistical environment, I guess, if you will, with runs created and WAR plus and all these things. I think you and I agree, though, that for this podcast, we don't try and focus on those numbers because that's just going to bore everyone out. And even though that there are certain players that will bear, a higher ranking based on these new statistics, which of course are relied upon by many teams in the major leagues, I think we just look at just what is tangible, I guess. A guy hits 40 home runs, he hits 40 home runs. I mean, maybe he hits 220 and strikes out 200 times, and another guy hits 25 home runs and hits 300 or whatever. We can argue who's going to be the better producer at that point, and that's not what we're here to do. I mean, look what we talked about earlier today. We're talking about the Giants, hitting 207 or whatever, 204 for the month of September and 217 in the month of August. I mean, you don't need advanced statistics to tell us that they suck.
Right.
That's the point, is that you look at, no matter what statistic you're looking at, whether it being, runs created or ERA plus or WAR or whatever, if you look at it month by month or team by team, you know who sucks. Just look at the average, I mean, the Giants just, the biggest, I guess qualms would be for me in terms of, common statistics would be, wins or whatever. That's just dumb. I think that's dumb. But when, you're talking about ERA and batting average and things like that, teams are going to, you have 10,000 at-bats per year. You're going to go ahead and get the average here. So the Giants are far, far, far below average. I don't think we need advanced statistics to tell us that the Giants suck.
Yeah, we don't. But on the flip side, and Sherman mentions it in the article, and you and I talked about it, if we were running a major league team, we would absolutely be focused on these statistics.
That's the problem.
The Moneyball revolution came about that when they realized that getting on base was more important than hits. At least that's what the thought process was. But you can't say, oh, well, this guy's, it's hard to qualify these statistics sometimes for us as average fans, and you and I, we know baseball through and through, but we're still going to look at certain numbers because, like you said, I don't need some stat to tell me if this guy's good or not. A lot of the times I can see it with my own eyes, and I can surmise it from his stat line, from his slash line. If I know this guy is hitting 300 and his on base is 400 and he's slugging 600, just total, fake numbers, I know that guy is a quality ball player who will put you in a position to win. And I agree with you on wins. Wins is one of those stats where you're dependent on the offense to get you that. I mean, we just talked about D-Rod and how he's getting caned. Jacob deGrom has 8 wins, and he might win the Cy Young Award this year. Actually, he should win the Cy Young Award this year. He has been that good, and Scherzer kind of blew up the other day to make it easier for him. So in this day and age, we can accept the new stats, but we don't have to quantify everything by them. And I think in the internet day and age, things have changed. Everybody wants to be right instead of having a discussion. And I don't know if that's a product of our country or the internet, but everybody wants to be right.
A little bit of both, I think.
I totally agree. Everybody must be right. I'm right, you're wrong. That seems to be, it's like the I got mine, screw you mentality. Yeah. And we have drifted away from the discussions. I remember being 19 years old, sitting on my driveway with my buddies, and, Mickey Mantle did this and this, yeah, but Willie Mays did this and this, and then we'd pull out the encyclopedia and we'd look at the stats and we'd be like, yeah, but, if this hadn't happened or that hadn't happened. I don't feel like those kinds of discussions are as prevalent nowadays. Yeah. I feel like everybody just wants, quote-unquote, facts about what they're told certain things are and what the numbers tell them. And it just makes me wonder, with some of the new fans who focus on this stuff more, how much do they really enjoy the game? I don't know if they do as much as we do. I still want to see a guy hit 30 home runs. I still love seeing a guy drive in 100 runs or score 100 runs or have 200 hits in a season. I still find those things to be benchmarks that are fun. And until we can find a replacement for those benchmarks that will thread through the generations, then we're going to stay with these older stats. Yeah. And like we said, there's a place for the newer stats in the game. But when you're talking in a general whole, you got to be able to thread the 80-year-old to the 20-year-old to have the same discussion, because sports are meant to bring us together. They're entertainment that is supposed to bring us together. We have shared experiences. Yeah. It's the whole reason we're on social media, to have the shared experience, the second screen experience. That's why I found Twitter in the first place, was the Giants, plain and simple. Now it's used for a million other things, but it's the world's biggest bar room. And we're no longer having those discussions. Now everybody's just trying to prove each other wrong. And it's frustrating as a fan. And I appreciate that Joel Sherman took the time to point it out, and he looked at a fan's perspective of it. In this, we've seen so many articles, and I think we talked about one a couple of weeks ago about stuff that ruins baseball. And baseball's not ruined. You want to know what's ruining baseball? Blackout restrictions. That's what's ruining baseball. The fact that somebody in
I agree. That's
Kansas,
way worse, by the way.
Yeah, there's somebody in Kansas who's blacked out of 6 teams. So then the 6 teams they're playing, so that's half the league. Getting your product to the masses. That's what keeps baseball relevant. And so I didn't take this as the statistical revolution is ruining baseball or anything. I just thought it was a good thing to look at and discuss and kind of see how the views have changed on the regular stats that you and I held dear for pretty much all our lives.
Yeah. No, it's a bad problem for baseball. I mean, it's good in the sense of analytics, but it's bad in the sense of fandom. So I think it's going to really evolve. We'll see if it comes back around in 10 years or whatever, when the high strikeout numbers are going to fade and get a little tiresome for teams, because I think that's that can't last forever. Nothing in baseball lasts forever. So I think it's just going to be cyclical. So for those of you holding out for the St. Louis Cardinals of the 80s kind of baseball, I think that's going to come back at some point, but definitely not in the next 5 or 10 years, but we'll see what happens. All right, so let's talk about National League and Major League Baseball playoffs. Milwaukee has a 3-game lead over St. Louis and the Dodgers in the wild card. Those two are 4 up on Arizona, 5 up on Philly. So the most likely scenario is that Arizona and Philly, with 12 games left, are not going to make the playoffs. But there's 3 teams fighting for those wild card positions right there. And, of course, LA is tied with the Cardinals. Of course, they're half game back of the Rockies right now. So, I mean, the Dodgers have a couple of outs right now, and that's what concerns me. It's just even though I don't play the Cardinals anymore, I don't want to see the Dodgers in the playoffs. I mean, I just don't. I did not foresee the Rockies making the playoffs in terms of either a wild card or the West, but as of right now, go Rockies. And I saw a lot of Giants fans over the weekend going, "Why are the Giants beating the Rockies? This is the worst thing ever." And it's like, okay, take a step back, understand. Giants have an exceedingly the worst record against the Rockies of any other team in the National League West. In fact, the Rockies swept the Giants just a week ago in Colorado. So don't tell me the Giants cannot beat the Rockies 2 out of 3. I mean, they've lost 9 out of 14 or whatever it is this year. I mean, the Giants have helped the Rockies overall. So don't give me that shit.
And I'm looking at schedules here, and I think St. Louis is going to be the one to fall off. I think that the Dodgers, my short term, we talked about it last week briefly, and I had Milwaukee and St. Louis locked in as the wild cards. And I even said last week I think the Dodgers will emerge with the division. But at this point, I think St. Louis is going to fade because their schedule, oh my God, St. Louis plays Atlanta for 3. Then they play, there it is, Atlanta for 3. Then they welcome in the Giants. And then they welcome in Milwaukee for 3. And then they finish the season at Wrigley for 3. And you're talking about
That's
Atlanta,
rough.
Milwaukee, and the Cubs. They're 3 of the best teams in the National League. And so it's going to be hard for the Cardinals to keep it up. And I'm enjoying that the Cardinals extended their interim manager, and then they fell back to earth after that when Matt Carpenter stopped driving in a run and a half every game.
Yeah.
I think looking at it down the stretch, though, I still give the edge to the Dodgers over the Rockies. I just feel like their schedule, the Rockies have 3 in LA starting tonight. Then the Rockies travel to Arizona. And then, like I said, they finish out the season against Philly and Washington. The Dodgers, on the other hand, they host the Rockies for these 3 games. Then they host the Padres. Very beneficial. The Padres suck. Then they go to Arizona after the Rockies are there. And the Dodgers, they love hitting in Arizona. They do. And then they finish the season against the Giants, and we all know how good they are. So it's starting to look to me like the Dodgers are probably going to eke this out, but I think the Rockies still sneak in as a wild card. And I have Milwaukee absolutely inked in as the hosting the wild card game this year.
Sure.
I think the Cubs hold them off. Last week we talked about whether or not the Braves and Phillies could go down to the wire, and then the Braves they kind of ran away with it this week. And what'd you say? They're oh my God, I think they're like 5 up on Philly at this point.
Yeah, no.
So that division's over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's over.
6.5. Oh my God, they're 6.5 up. Forget about it. That's over. So the two races are the Cubs in Milwaukee in the Central, and the Rockies and Dodgers in the West. But the Rockies and Dodgers are separated by a half game. The Cubs and Brewers are separated by 2.5 games.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard for the Brewers. I mean, with 12, 13 games to go, depending on what they have left. I think they only have 12 as well. It's going to be tough for them to catch the Cubs at this point.
Yeah, the American League is even, more decided, I would say. Boston, Houston, and Cleveland have pretty much locked up their divisions. Cleveland technically has already locked that up. Houston and Boston are about to. And then, of course, the wild card, New York and Oakland, are separated by only a game and a half. So, I mean, it could be that Oakland gets home field advantage. Maybe New York does. But no other teams are sneaking in. Those are the 5 in the American League. So that's going to be, really, really interesting. Let's talk about today in Giants history. Barry Bonds on September 17th, which is today, 2004, hit his 700th home run against Jake Peavy, ironically, of the San Diego Padres. Here we go.
Shift is on for Bonds. Bonds hits one to left center field. He hits it well. Plesko back. It is out of here. Number 700 for Barry Bonds. Aaron, Ruth, and now Bonds, the 700 home run club, as Bonds steps on home plate, and listen to this crowd.
Okay, so pretty incredible moment. I I was actually there for 600, 660, and 700, and 756 against the knuckleballer for the Dodgers. So I happen to place myself in pretty good company. But that was an amazing thing. I mean, it's funny to hear Dwayne Kuiper. It's like that was 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was already broadcasting Giants games for a long time prior to that. But pretty cool to hear, no matter what you think about the Bonds era. But Jesus Christ, 700 home runs, man. What a great accomplishment.
Yeah, that's a great this date in Giants history, because I kind of, if you isolate the audio a little bit, you can hear Chad cheering in that crowd noise, so make sure to pick that up.
I think I still have a couple of streamers from that game, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Not joking, by the way. No, it was a great game. I was much younger at the time in my, what would have been, 14, yeah, I was about 30 years old, so just almost 30. I might have been 29, so now I'm 44. So there you go. All right, let's talk about who's hot and who is not. So who's hot? Joe Panic is 7 for his last 15 in his last 7 games. So that's not too bad. That's almost a 500 batting average. And Nick Hundley, who had been cold for a better part of 2 months, is 5 for his last 14. Now, who's not? This thing could go on forever, Eric. That's the problem. Is like every
Yes,
time you and I look up these stats, it's kind of almost like, do we really need to continue? Let's just get a couple and just go, yeah, they suck. We could go forever and ever. But at the top of the list, Brandon Belt, 1 for his last 11. Gregor Blanco, 2 for his last 17. Brandon Crawford, who has been cold since the All-Star game, or just before the All-Star game, 3 for his last 23. And Slater, 3 for his last 18. There are more players that I could put on this list. it just highlights the fact that the Giants' offense has been non-existent. And I just... The problem is that we're including players that traditionally have been pretty good. And everyone seems to be going cold, especially in this latter half of the season. And my question is, why? I mean, why are some of these players going so cold?
I mean, who knows? Maybe firing the strength and conditioning coach was for a reason, because these guys have hit a wall. I mean, I would like to give props to Aramis Garcia. The guy's hitting 368 in 19 at-bats.
Yeah,
He's got 2 home runs.
He's doing well. Yeah.
On the flip side, Shaw is hitting 115. Although yesterday he did come through and have his first multi-hit game as a pro. But he only has 3 hits on the season, and that was that 1 home run, and he's driven in 4 runs at this point. But I mean, who the hell knows? It's like you said, we can list everybody at this point. I mean, like I said earlier, Crawford leads the team with 51 runs batted in. Posey is going to finish the year as the batting leader at 284, and after that, nobody's above 260. Panic and Crawford are hitting 254 on the year. It's embarrassing. I don't know. There's nothing to account for it except for the end of a long season. But it's nice to see Joe Panik finally start to hit the ball, because he started the year great, and then he had the injuries, and the old Joe Panik has been missing. But I'd say over the last week, you're right. He kind of has popped back up a little bit, and I'm sure for a guy like that who struggled this year, he wants to finish strong.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, coming up, the Giants have 3 in San Diego starting tonight, with Suarez starting, and then 3 in St. Louis, which is going to have a big impact on the wild card situation with the Dodgers and the Cardinals. So, hey, look, again, the Giants beat the Rockies 2 out of 3. The Rockies only have a half-game lead, but the Giants overall really lost against the Rockies this year. So don't at us that the Giants gave up the season, losing to or beating the Rockies, or whatever. Letting the Dodgers take over. That's just not the case. But the Giants can play the role of spoiler against the Cardinals coming up, and then against the Dodgers in the last weekend of the season. So if the Dodgers and Rockies, because assumedly the Diamondbacks are out of the season, if they're within 3 games going into that last series, the Giants have a lot to play for. And now, the Giants have hinted that Madison Bumgarner, the rotation is going to be adjusted so he can pitch during that streak, or that series. So we'll see what happens. But it's down to 12 games, guys. I think I'm going to cover one more. But other than that, I mean, not much left to play for except for being the royal spoiler. I know it sucks. I mean, it's like... We were here last year. I mean, I didn't think we were going to be here this year. I really didn't. I really thought that the Giants were going to be active until the very last couple of weeks of the season. That's not the case because of their 11-game losing streak. That really just, they're 12 games back now. So, I mean, even if they had gone 5-6 during that stretch, they'd still be 7 games back. So it's not like they would have won the West, guys. I mean, don't get me wrong. Even if they won all 11 in a row, which they had, won 2 prior to that, so it's actually technically a 13-game winning streak, and then you add the 2 Rockies games, which makes it a 15-game winning streak, the Giants would still be 1 game back. So my point is, Giants weren't going to win the West this year, guys. Unless they had a historic winning streak. So it's just the way it is. It's the way this team is built, and don't have the offensive firepower. But we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, I'm just upset that there's only 2 weeks left of baseball.
I know, that's the thing. It's just so frustrating.
Yeah, well, all winter long we're waiting for the Giants. So my recommendation to Giants fans is just enjoy it when you can. Enjoy those little moments like the Shaw home run or Garcia, or enjoy Pence's last games. Try to look for the good in the last couple weeks, because it's going to make the offseason a little more bearable. And trust me, this team is going to look a lot different next year.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so coming up, like I said, they have 3 in San Diego and 3 at St. Louis, and then back for their final homestand versus San Diego and L.A. So you can follow us collectively at TortureCast or like us on Facebook at TortureCast. You can follow us individually at 2OddHits. That's with the number 2 for Eric, and at ChadK21. So for Eric, this is Chad King signing off for episode 154. We'll see you next Monday for episode 155. Until then, have a great week. Boom.
A big thank you to everybody for listening to the TortureCast, the podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. Follow us on Twitter at TortureCast. You can also like us on Facebook or check out our blog at TortureCast.com. I also want to say thank you to Ashcon and Bailey for letting us use their song Feeling Like a Giant for our intro. For Ben Lee and Chad King, my name is Willie Dills saying, we'll see you next time.